A warm coastal light often defines the first moments Americans experience when they land in Australia. There is an immediate contrast that feels almost cinematic. A continent-sized country with the population of a mid-sized US state, where cities stretch outward instead of upward, and where daily life seems to hum at a slower, steadier frequency. Many visitors describe a subtle cultural puzzle that appears right away. Australia feels familiar in language and lifestyle, yet something underneath operates differently, more self-contained, and noticeably less urgent. This mixture of comfort and strangeness becomes the foundation of a dynamic many Americans encounter. An instant love for the environment paired with an unexpected difficulty when trying to build a life inside it. Early impressions often revolve around the sensory atmosphere. Streets feel quieter, even in cities with millions of residents. Conversations sound more relaxed, as if people intentionally leave space between words. Social interactions carry a softness that Americans notice quickly: the absence of small confrontations, the reluctance to escalate tension, the tendency to downplay rather than amplify. Even the physical environment reinforces this impression. Beaches remain uncluttered, weekdays feel less chaotic, and the national humor leans toward understatement rather than bold expression. For many Americans, these details form a picture of a lifestyle that feels healthier, more grounded, and refreshingly detached from the intensity of home. But beneath these appealing surface traits lies a deeper difference in cultural priorities. Australians tend to value balance over ambition, community over individual achievement, and stability over personal reinvention. The country's social fabric rewards modesty, discourages excessive self-promotion, and places strong emphasis on blending in rather than standing out. This quiet, egalitarian mindset can be disorienting for Americans who often come from a culture where standing out is encouraged and success is measured through visible momentum. In Australia, displaying too much intensity, whether in career, lifestyle, or personality, can be viewed with suspicion rather than admiration. This cultural gap becomes more noticeable through daily interactions. Workplace environments prioritize cooperation over hierarchy, making the energetic, self-advocating American style seem unusually forceful. Friendships form slowly, built through consistent presence rather than spontaneous connection, leaving many long-term visitors feeling that social circles are harder to enter than expected. Even the national rhythm of life can feel surprisingly controlled. Holidays stretch long, weekends are treated as sacred, and the national mood leans toward emotional evenness rather than dramatic highs or lows. Yet these differences also create a powerful emotional pull. The same cultural traits that challenge long-term adjustment often make short visits feel almost idyllic. Many Americans find that Australia represents a vision of life marked by simplicity, natural beauty, and a gentle pace that feels increasingly rare in their own culture. The challenge emerges not in loving Australia, but in adapting to the quieter expectations that shape its deeper social reality. The contrast becomes more pronounced as Americans begin observing how social boundaries are defined. In Australia, relationships are often built through consistent shared activity rather than verbal openness. Emotional restraint functions as a kind of cultural courtesy. Enthusiasm is welcomed, but exaggeration is not. Compliments are offered sparingly. Personal achievements are mentioned briefly, almost apologetically, as if acknowledging too much pride might disrupt the equilibrium. To Americans, who are accustomed to encouragement as a form of social bonding, this muted communication style can feel like a quiet barrier. Daily routines reinforce the same understated worldview. Workplaces end the day earlier, lunches stretch longer, and long weekends are treated almost as a civic right. Australians tend to prioritize time off with a seriousness Americans usually reserve for productivity. The country's no worries attitude isn't just a phrase. It represents a collective expectation that life should remain manageable and that stress should never become a dominant identity. Many Americans admire this mindset instantly, noting how it shapes healthier lifestyles and a more grounded social mood. But living within it can create tension, especially for those accustomed to measuring self-worth through output and momentum. Common situations reveal these deeper contrasts. A team meeting might unfold with gentle debate rather than assertive argument. Neighbors may greet each other politely for years before considering themselves true friends. Social gatherings often center on shared presence rather than intense conversation, with silences treated as natural, not awkward. Even nightlife follows a different emotional rhythm, energetic but not restless, social but not attention-seeking. These seemingly small patterns form the architecture of Australian daily life, and they shape a society where blending in is a quiet expectation for many Americans. The challenge arises when the initial admiration transitions into long-term adaptation. The cultural emphasis on modesty can feel like a constraint. The slower pace, once refreshing, may eventually create a sense of stagnation. The social reserve that once seemed peaceful may begin to feel like distance. Australia's beauty and calmness remain constant, yet living within its understated culture requires adopting a form of emotional subtlety that doesn't always align with American social instincts. Still, these very differences shape a deeper transformation for those who stay long enough to observe it. Many Americans begin to appreciate how the Australian mindset creates a certain emotional steadiness, a life with fewer extremes, fewer crises, and fewer pressures to impress. The culture's reluctance to glorify ambition encourages people to rediscover balance. The reserved social atmosphere, while difficult to penetrate, supports long-lasting relationships once trust forms. Australia's steady, quiet rhythm begins to feel like a philosophical stance rather than a lifestyle choice, a belief that a well-lived life doesn't need to be constantly optimized or performed over time. The cultural contrast shapes a deeper reflection on what it means to belong. Many Americans find themselves torn between admiration for Australia's equilibrium and nostalgia for the dynamism of home. The Australian way of life encourages presence rather than acceleration. It values practicality over perfection, contentment over constant striving. It invites a person to let go of urgency, soften ambition, and settle into a rhythm where each day feels less like a race and more like a cycle. For short-term visitors, this feels like a rare luxury. For long-term residents, it requires a shift in identity that doesn't come easily. The emotional climate plays a significant role in this inner adjustment. Australia's low-conflict culture promotes harmony but often avoids direct confrontation, leaving tensions unspoken rather than addressed. Americans, accustomed to clear articulation and rapid resolution, sometimes find the silence confusing. Moments that would be openly discussed in the United States linger quietly here, fading rather than resolving. Friendships, though slow to form, offer steadiness rather than intensity. Loyalty emerges gradually, shaped by consistency rather than dramatic connection. This difference in emotional pacing leads many Americans to realize that relationships in Australia grow like native landscapes, slowly, resiliently, shaped by patience and subtlety. Even the physical environment reinforces this transformation. The vast coastlines, expansive skies, and wide suburban streets encourage a spacious mindset. People move at a tempo shaped by sunlight and seasons rather than deadlines. The built environment rejects overcrowding, favoring spread-out neighborhoods and gentle rhythms that make the days feel longer. Many Americans find themselves developing new habits, walking more, stressing less, expecting less noise from the world around them. But adjusting to this spaciousness can feel unsettling when one's instincts were shaped in places where urgency is normal and stillness is rare. Ultimately, the puzzle of why Americans love Australia yet struggle to stay lies in this delicate emotional balance. Australia offers a version of life that feels almost ideal during a visit, calm, safe, socially understated, and grounded in a quiet confidence. But living within that calm requires internal shifts that don't align easily with American cultural programming. The admiration remains, yet the adjustment demands a softer approach to ambition, a slower path to connection, and a comfort with modesty that takes time to learn. This dynamic reveals a broader truth about cultural movement. The environments that feel most beautiful from afar often hold the deepest challenges when lived from within. Many Americans discover that Australia's appeal lies not only in its landscapes or lifestyle, but in the introspective contrast it creates, a reminder that every culture shapes its people in distinct emotional rhythms. And in that contrast emerges a quiet insight that loving a place and belonging to it are two very different experiences, each shaped by the subtle, often invisible patterns of daily life.